Okay, everybody, welcome to this evening's stream. This evening we've got a return to our Masterclass series. So we're going to be taking a look at UI and how you can create UI in Crayta in various different ways and sort of various different options that are available to you. So hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a bit of knowledge as to how you can start to add your own UIs to games, as well as use the community tab to get some of your own UIs available. We're here with Sean. So Sean is our UI and UX designer at Unit 2 Games, so probably the perfect person to come and show us some of the ropes when it comes to HTML and CSS. So yeah, Sean, do you want to say hello?
Hi.
Cool. So what we'll do is we'll just jump right into here. So what we've got here is a game that we're starting with. So as I say, we're not going to really show any game creation this time. It's going to be more a case of showing how this game how this game can be sort of extended with UI to explain rules and sort of show how it works. So the premise of the game is it's a game called Push the Button. So the idea is players will have to sort of watch a clock, the clock will disappear, and they have to try and press their button after they think a sort of target time has elapsed. So it's a relatively straightforward game. Using some of our new meshes, so we've got the seating and sort of camera things down there. I've turned it into a bit of like a game show, so that's the idea we're going for.
It does look very nice.
Thank you very much. It's a morning well spent. So if I go preview now, and if I just bring up the console. Okay, so I'm not sure how clear this will come through on the stream, but I've got a couple of lines in the console here saying welcome Namaki and welcome Russ. Press space to start. So at the minute, all of the game instructions and everything about how this game works are all in the console. So what we're going to do throughout the stream is we're going to take those elements out of the console and start to actually introduce them as on-screen elements. So if you're ready, Sean?
Yep.
Okay, I've pressed ready. So we see it says get ready, go, and that's going to start counting up. And if I press my button and Sean presses his button, that's going to lock that we've both pressed it. And then at this point, it would give us the results to say, okay, well, I pressed it after 3 seconds. So the target time is 30 seconds. So I have 26 seconds out and Sean was 23 seconds out. So he would win.
Only slightly.
Only slightly. So I guess for the sake of demonstration. Okay, should we have a quick go? See if we can do it for real.
I can count to 10. Counting 30 is more difficult.
It is. So I think, so we can still see the time here in the console. Okay, so that's hidden now.
10. I've already lost it. I'm just going to wait until you press it. I can't remember.
Can't handle it. It goes in. Oh, okay. So you're playing the copycat game. Okay, who got closest? Oh, yeah. Very good. I was a bit too quick. So yeah, you win that one. Okay, so I'm going to press F5 and return there. So we've got several bits of UI that we're going to add to this. So things like the timer, the results screen. We'll add some sort of an introduction screen, some help text. So there's all sorts of different things we're going to add. But what I thought would be handy to start with is actually showing you how you can download UI from the community tab and actually start introducing UI to your game if you don't know how to make UI. So all we need to do for that is go to our community tab. So I can do this in basic mode. Okay, and the example I'm going to show in here is our notifications. Okay, so I'm going to install that package. So if I now go to my templates and edit my user. Okay, and we'll just wait a second while the drone appears to do its thing. Okay, so what I can do now is add to my user this user notifications. So that's what's just come out of that package. Okay, and if I just close this, in fact, if I just go there, so we can see we get this prominent shout message up here. So that's straight away, that's one way that I can enable UI in my game. I can download that from the community tab, and that's going to come with a script which will power when this appears, and a notification widget which gives me the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript required to show these things. So here I can see there's a shout just here. And just behind this window, there's a notification. So you might recognize this if you started any of the starter games. So these things are available for people to bring into their own. And it's not just stock packages. So we've had a couple of community members make some pretty useful sort of sign packages, which give you the options to customize your own signs. So do make sure you head out and check the community tab for anything that might help you in your game, especially when it comes to UI creation. Okay, so I'll set that up again in a moment when we look at our game script to get some of those notifications to appear. But I think what would be quite good to start with is I might just pop to the advanced mode. So UI creation itself is a sort of an advanced mode side of the game. But as I say, don't worry if you are new to Crayta and you're sort of still in the basic side. These things are available from the community tab, as I said. So I think first things first, shall we get our timer on the screen is probably a good one to start with, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's going to really kind of set the game up. So we've got this billboard screen over here ready for us. Okay, so this first one we're going to add is going to exist as world space UI. So it's not going to be UI that is on the user or the player, actually on the screen. It's going to be in the world. So these are the things we have to think about when we're creating UI. We have to really start kind of working out how we want the UI to appear in the world or in the game. And then off the back of that, there'll be decisions about how we update it from code or how it's displayed. So one quick tip to start with is whenever you're adding world space UI, one good thing to do is to create a child locator of the thing or the position you want the UI to appear in. If I add a locator here, okay, and I'm just going to rename this my screen UI. Okay, and now on that locator, I'm going to create a UI widget. Okay, and let's call this my screen UI. Okay, so now what we have, if I just go down to here, we have the screen UI component of widget, which is now added to our locator. Okay, so a widget is a component, a bit like a script or a bit like other components we have that represents the UI itself. So we have a few parameters available to us. So things like the type. So is it screen UI? So like a health bar or a heads up display or a map, that sort of thing. The order in which it appears. So if you want to kind of have multiple things laid on top of each other. The visibility. So we can hover over this to get a description. So the visibility determines who can see the widget. So for example, setting it to remote only means that it's only visible to other players except yourself. So that's quite a useful way of controlling things that you'd only want other players to see and not on your own screen. So there's a few options there to play with. But in most cases, you'll probably want to leave that as visibility auto, especially as you're starting out with UI creation. So first, let's create a world space. So we change that to world, and now we notice we get a few more things to play with here. Okay, things like the size and the way the behavior and that sort of thing. Okay, and if we get really close, we can see we get this, your header here. So, okay, so this is our sort of default template. Sean's just going to rotate that. So that's fine if you want to snap that to 90 degrees, Sean. And I think a good size.
Let's make it nice and chunky.
Is that sort of size. So if we
that's good.
That's good. Yeah, it's almost like I'd practiced that number earlier. Okay, so if we hover over this, we can see we get this just sort of yellow border, and that's going to give us an idea of how big this in-world UI is. Okay, so that's not me trying to set that size in HTML. That's me saying, okay, this widget, so this sort of in-world entity, is going to take up this size. Okay, and there's other options available to us here, so like the brightness in which it appears and whether it's texture lit to determine how it behaves with the lighting and that sort of thing. But I think for the most part, we'll leave those, and I'll kind of let Sean control those if he wants to change them.
Okay.
And I guess the final thing to touch upon in the parameters here is the quality. So at the minute, the quality is very high. So if you had a lot of in-world UI that was all set to very high, you might notice that starts to have an impact on performance. If it doesn't need to be a very high quality, then you could easily drop that down to some other presets, so high, medium, or low, depending on what the UI is trying to portray. And in some cases, that might just help with performance and load times and that sort of thing. So that's something to keep in mind as you set up World Space UI. Okay, so let's get into making the UI itself. So if I want to edit this asset, I'm going to click here. I can see Sean's nice and busy in here already. So if anyone is familiar with our code editor, so if you've done any Lua scripting or you've watched previous streams, you'll notice that the code editor itself is all built into Crayta. And again, the beautiful thing there is that it's actually all collaborative. So a big part of Crayta is that we want to kind of make creation of games as collaborative as possible. So instead of just stopping at world creation, we thought, we'd extend that over to the code side itself. And that also doesn't stop when it comes to HTML widget creation. So I'm not typing here. I'm in this script at the same, this widget at the same time as Sean, and he's busy here typing away, doing his CSS and HTML wizardry that I'm not too familiar with. So I'm going to let him get on with that. While he does that, Sean, do you want to just maybe run us through some common gotchas and tips around kind of working with UI in Crayta?
Yeah. So if anyone comes from even a vaguely web dev background, we're using for our UI middleware something called Coherent Game Face, which is like a subset of HTML, CSS, and JS, which is fine-tuned specifically for UI development. So one of the common gotchas when people come into this is GameFace specifically uses Flexbox systems by default because it's much easier to make like consistent layouts. It's easier for well-spaced elements and stuff. So everything basically in a CSS element in here is Flexbox. So that's one of the first biggest things that trips everyone up. So there are a few links that we'll drop in chat at some point to teach you Flexbox. There's a fun little web game called Flexbox Froggy, which is what I used to use when I was like 10 years ago to teach myself Flexbox. Other things, so the UI renders, especially in screen space, it can render either 1080, 1440, or 4K. And when you do like font size and stuff, you tend to use like pixels, so specific elements, specific measurements, which you obviously don't want to do because something that looks fine at say 21 pixels on a 1080 screen will look tiny on a 4K screen. So you can use something called relative EMs, so REM. So you'll see in the widget I'm now making, the time widget, I'm using REM measurements. So these are relative, so they'll scale from 1080 up to 4K to 1440 to your tiny little phone. Everything will look the same. So yeah, try and use relative units when possible.
Cool. Yeah, so that's a really useful way, as I say, as Sean mentioned, is kind of making sure that if your game's played across the different resolutions, that everything's positioned and fits in the same way. You might have just noticed there I flicked through a couple of websites, so we'll share those links out. We'll perhaps add them to the description after the stream, or we'll get them into the chat at some point later on in the stream, perhaps. But so there's quite some pretty useful resources out there, especially when it comes to using Coherent, using Flexbox, and that frog game looks really quite cool, Sean. Actually, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it's brilliant for gamifying CS learning.
So I feel like that's something I'm going to have to go and play with. Okay, so while we covered that, you may have noticed I added a new script, so a Lua script, just like we've added in the past several times on streams. Isn't just for gameplay logic necessarily, but it kind of powers the way that the UI can work with the game. So I'm going to leave Sean to crack on with this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this script here, which is going to act as our script, which is going to handle kind of pushing data forward to that UI. Cool. So the big thing here, especially when it comes to UI, to start working out is how the server and the client work together. So this is quite an advanced topic when it comes to gameplay creation. And again, it's a nice thing that we've done here with Crayta is to make that as easy to kind of work with as possible. So in the past, in sort of traditional game development, multiplayer, scripting and coding and networking is notoriously the kind of the real difficult thing to crack. So what we've done here out the box in Crayta is made that really as simple as possible. So you can do all of your server and client side code on the same script to start with, which is a really handy way of keeping things nice and neat and tidy. So you might ask, what is the difference between the server and the client? So the best thing to think of is the server is the sort of the central point in which the game logic is run, and that exists over, let's say, at Google Stadia HQ. So that's a big box, big server over there that's running all of those sorts of things that we want to run on the server. Now the client itself is the individual player, it's the person. So each player is a client that is connected to the one server that is running the game. So when it comes to UI, we want to make sure that we're always using the client itself. So we want to show a health bar on a player. Obviously, if one player is at 50% health, then their health bar should show 50%, whereas everybody else's should show 100. So you have to remember that health, that these UIs will exist for specific clients and not for everybody. In the same way, outside of UI, you might want to have certain parts of the level visible to some players and not others, or you might have some effects play on a single client. So that's one way to think of that, is each client is an individual player, whereas the server is this sort of single main server that is handling all those things that we want it to. Okay, we do have some tutorials, and we'll find, again, we'll add links to the description after the stream, but the tutorial we have will kind of run through a little bit more about how the server and the client work together. So as we can see here from our script, the default init that we get, so initialize function, is that is called on the server. So first thing we want to do is want to make sure that actually we're working on the client side. So we can add a new function here, green UI script client init. Okay, so if I just leave that there, we can see the API is telling me that client init is called to initialize a script on the client. So we want to make sure we're using this version instead of the server version. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to get a reference to this widget so we can use it throughout the script. So self.widget equals, okay, so that's going to set up my variable to store this reference in. And then what we can do, quite straightforward, so we do similar things on the server here. Kind of the syntax between the server and the client is very similar, if not almost identical. So self get entity dot screen UI. Okay, so that screen UI there is going to match up with the name of my widget here, so that's going to give me that reference. Okay, and that's all I really want to do there. I just want to have a place to say, right, now that's my widget stored. Okay, so now I'm going to want another function in here. Okay, and we'll call this update screen UI. Okay, and this is going to take a message and a flag to say whether it's a time that we're displaying or not. And I'll explain that a little bit more later, but basically we're going to pass a string or a sort of a text to this, and it's either going to have, it's either going to be a word, so it's going to say get ready or go, or it's going to be a time in which we want to format it differently, and that's going to be controlled by this is time here. So as I said before, obviously when we're working in UI, we always want to make sure we're on the client. So a really good way to make sure that you are on the client is obviously to always call it on the client. But if we call this function from the server, we need to kind of have a way in this function to always catch that and say, if I'm on the server, then actually now let's recursively call myself and make sure we're on the client. So that'll make a bit more sense in a moment once I've finished this. So if I was to say if is client, okay, and then again, we get this as a global function, so I don't need to have anything before this. I can simply say is client, and this will return true if the script's currently running on the client. Okay, so if it is the client, then else end. Okay, so if it is the client, we're going to do whatever's in this side of the code block. Otherwise, we must be on the server at this point, so we need to tell the game, actually, let's update the clients instead. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit tricky again. So we have to remember that this is world space UI, and as I mentioned before, each individual player has their own client. So what we need to do here that's key is make sure that we update all of the clients, because all of the clients need to make sure that they see the right time on the screen. So as I said before with the health bar, each player would have their own health bar, and obviously we wouldn't want to update all of the clients' health bars when one player takes damage. But in this case, we want to make sure that every client sees the same time. So this is where we'd use our send to all clients option. Okay, and then that gives us the events there. So if you've used things like send to scripts, in the past, and this is a very similar idea. So it's called send to all clients. Okay, and that's going to need an event name or the function name. Okay, so in this case, we're actually going to call the function that we're actually in already. So this update screen UI. And then we need to make sure that we pass our 2 parameters along with it. Okay, so imagine I've called this and I'm still on the server. I'm going to say, is it the client? That's going to be false. So we're going to fall into here. This line is then going to send to every client on this script to call this function again. But then this time, obviously, because we've said this here, we are going to be on the client and we can carry on with what we're doing. So hopefully that starts to make a bit of sense. As I say, it's quite a complex subject. It starts to get a little bit more advanced. But I feel like once you start to, you've done this a couple of times and you really start to get your head around the way that the client and the server interact, then it's really quite straightforward in terms of the amount of code required at least. So what I can do now is I can access my self.widget client init variable up here because I know I'm on the client. If I wasn't on the client, then even though I've declared self.widget here, if I was on the server, then this would return nil because this isn't on the server. Right, so next thing, we want to push our message through to the UI. Okay, so as Sean is setting this up, we can see we've got this model here. Okay, so a data model is a collection of variables and sort of packaged up into a way that we can then update that model. And then that model itself is bound into the HTML here. So we see we've got our coherent game face binding here. So data bind value will take whatever's stored in data.timer. And almost imagine if I was writing this. So what we've got here is as our dummy data is 00:00. So what would happen is that would essentially put that in our tag just like that. Okay, and now that is how we can make the UI dynamic. So as the timer increases, as we update whatever's stored in this data.timer variable, okay, GameFace is going to handle that for us and keep putting that inside this tag here. So again, a couple of lines of code, and it's quite a straightforward way of really getting some powerful dynamic UI in there. It's worth mentioning at this point that the things you can do with the data binds does get quite sophisticated. This is quite a sort of entry level thing to be doing, but there's quite a deep library of options, and we'll explore a few later on. But these are really good things to start getting your head around and starting to practice using in your UI. Okay, so I can access that by saying if.js, so JS being our JavaScript. So the next thing would be, what is our model called? Well, here we can see it's called data. So let's put that there. Okay, and then it was data.timer, and our timer is equal to, right, so here we want to use our isTime flag. So if isTime, then else end. So another statement in here. So if anyone hasn't seen, actually, so this is the first time I'm going to try copy paste. We've enabled Stadia and Crayta now allows for copy and pasting. So each time you do it, you will get this prompt to say that it's going to run for the duration of this session. There may be some sort of permissions and things to enable at a browser level if you're on the browser, just to make sure that that's going to work. So if you find you are struggling with it, then do make sure you check the permissions to make sure that you've allowed it to happen. But in this case, I'm going to click allow. Okay, and that's going to let me copy and paste that here. And that does mean I can now copy and paste in and out of Stadia from an external source, which I know Sean's really pleased with.
I very am.
It's kind of going to make your life a lot easier, I think, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got our message going into there. Okay, and now we want to format a time. We can do a little trick here. So on our text, sort of text parameter here, we can do a format time. Okay, and then format time is going to take a couple of arguments. So first one is, what do we want to see? So we want to see minutes, seconds and milliseconds. And the time itself is be whatever's stored in our message at that point. Okay, so that's our function there. This should handle everything we need now to update the screen and the UI with what we need to. Now we just need somewhere to actually call this function. So I'm going to go to my game script. Okay, so this is quite a long script which is going to power all of the functionality which I've already written, so don't worry too much about trying to understand too much of the script around it here. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that our game loop is updating with at the relevant times. So here when I can UI, let's see, how are you getting on, Sean? I feel like you've probably mastered that UI by now.
Yeah. So the timer's all set up and ready for you.
Timer's all set up and ready. While I keep going with this, do you maybe want to move on to the next one? I think what would be good for the next one was the what we're going to say next. The results. Do you want to have a go at the results?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll come and join you on the results in a moment. Cool. So first things first, we need to get a link to this entity. So this entity being the locator that we've attached our widget to. Our game script needs to know where this UI is. So the best way to do that is to add a new property up here. Okay, so we'll add a screen UI entity of type entity. Okay, so if I go to my game controller, I can see I've got this new element here. And I can now just drag my screen UI into there. Now my game controller itself has a entity link to where that UI lives. And at this point, I can now push to that entity to get things updated as I want to. So in this case, I want to have the word get ready. So let's say self.properties. Screen UI entity. Okay, send to scripts. Okay, so what was our function? It was called update screen UI. So we can put that in there. And now what we need to do is put a message in. So I could just write get ready, okay, and that would put that string through. But one thing to make sure we do with UI where possible and as where we can is to actually pass this through as a text parameter. So a text parameter looks like a string and behaves very similar to a string. But actually what it does is it allows us to, in the future, it'll allow us to hopefully, get the localization to work, and it will localize on the local client is what I'm trying to say. So what I'd need to do instead is actually set up a self.properties. Let's say game or get ready. Let's say get ready message. Okay. So our get ready message can now be set up in our properties. So just like any other one, we can give it a name. So that would be our get ready message. Okay, and the type is of type text. So now in my properties, I get the same sort of thing up here, but you'll notice this little edit text icon, which lets me bring it up a bit like a text area. So I can put quite a lot of text in here if I want to, but I'm just going to simply say get ready. Okay, so by passing that through as a text, let's say that's going to allow the UI to localize that on the client. Okay, so the next parameter we needed to send there was to say false. Okay, and that false will appear with our is time. And because get ready isn't a time, it's going to just straight up display that and not try and format it. Okay, so let's do it again with go. Let's set up a go message. Okay, and that would just be go. And then the next thing we wanted to do is obviously update our time itself. So we have a couple of things up here, and I've left myself a little comment behind that. So let's remove that. So let's keep that there just in case we need it.
Comments are always good.
They are always good. So let's, this time we don't want to pass in our message. We want to pass in our self.gameTime parameter, which is our sort of ticking clock. But this time we want to change this to true, and this will make sure that we format that time correctly at the other end. Okay, and then finally, we probably want to update this to say something like, time hidden. So self.properties time hidden message. Okay, and we'll set that back to false because that's not going to be a time. And then finally, we'll just add that to our properties. Okay, cool. So we've covered quite a lot in that, so hopefully people are keeping up. And as always, these streams will be archived, so don't worry too much if you're not following along too much. It's always available for you to go back and check and sort of follow through and pause and rewind and slow down, all that sort of stuff. But basically all we've done there is we've set up a world space UI that should look great because Sean's done that for us, with a little bit of data binding so we can push through values, and then we've written the relative Lua around that to get that to happen. So I think there we are, there's our big clock from Sean. So I think if you're happy, Sean, we could hit go and see how this behaves.
Give me 1 sec. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Cool. Let's preview now. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so we can still see we've got our sort of console for the beginning. So if I just press space, I'm ready. Okay, we've got our message. It says get ready.
Yes.
Oh, it's gone wrong.
Samosa.
The samosa. Okay. Let's go back. Let's see what I did wrong there. What did I do wrong? There we are. This is classic me, us two trying to program together. I think it's because I've added I don't think I need those braces, or do I?
And where are you? Screen UI.
Screen UI script line 21, formatting the time. Is it single curly brace or one curly brace?
Oh, don't worry.
So for this format time, it like this, the double curly braces.
Oh, geez.
Tell you what, I just
that doesn't look great. What did you do?
I did it with the single before.
All right, double.
See what happens. Double it up. Okay, get ready. Oh no.
Even better.
Even better, right.
Hang on. I think I got the... Oh no, I see what it is. You were right with single braces.
Okay. Is that right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, let's see. Okay.
Third time's a charm.
There we go. Cool. Okay. So we're back in the game. So now we should see, after 10 seconds, we should get hidden.
Ooh.
And now we wait. I forgot to count.
Should we reduce it to 10 seconds? Because I get messed up after. I forgot to count. I was gonna press a button. There we go.
Oh. Let's see what we've got. Oh, we were way off. 22 and 23 seconds. Okay, cool.
Didn't realize it was that long.
And then what should happen now is our game loop should go through and we should see that reset. Any second now. There we are. Get ready. Okay. And then the clock should start. And okay, we get the picture. So we've got a few things going on there. Cool. Right. One down. Nice. So what we're going to work on next. So Sean's already started this for us, I believe. I just
the game results on the user.
Out. Okay. So that's an example of how we can set up world space UI. So now we want to set up some UI to appear on the user itself on the screen. Okay, so let's go to our user. Oh, spoilers. I think I've just shown off your pretty nice game intro.
Oh no.
Cool. So Sean's done a really nice UI for us here for this intro, but let's skip past that. Okay, so we've got this game results UI that I see Sean's working on. We've got a little bit of a UI at the top there. Okay, so much the same way, we've just got our user template with a script folder. Now, script folders are a really handy way of combining widgets and UIs together. So in this case, our game results UI is going to be a widget and a script in our game results script folder. Okay, and then if we wanted to add more, so you can see here our notifications exist in a different one, so on and so forth. So having them organized in script folders is a really handy way of just keeping it nice and neat. Otherwise, you would have it all on the user and you'd end up with several widgets and several scripts. So yeah, I'd highly encourage just a right click, create child script folder, and then from there you can go on and quite easily organize your world tree. Okay, so a couple of things to note in here. Let's have a look, see what Sean's got set up. Okay, so this time our model, again, very similar. We've got our data with our results, but this time you'll notice that it's got a little bit more information in it. So by using these square braces, what we actually end up with is an array. So if you imagine our results table is going to be a bit like a scoreboard. It's going to have lots of information on it in rows, or however you want to organize it, but we're going to do it in rows. So we're going to have the username, the time, and then the difference. So i.e. the difference, between the target time and their time. So we can set this up just like we see here. So with our curly braces to sort of define a record amongst our square brackets, which is kind of the whole collection. Okay. A really good way to sort of get your head around and learn this is by jumping into starter games or installing the scoreboard package. Because the scoreboard package comes with a scoreboard widget, which is our default one you see in all of the starter games. And just looking through the widget in there, you hopefully start to get an idea of how all this comes together. So we've got our data results. Okay, so now in code, what we see is our data bind values again. So we can see that we have data bind value player result name. So player result isn't strictly in our model here, but actually we've got another sort of clever data bind here, which is a data bind for. So if you're someone who's come from a coding background or is kind of starting to pick up Lua and understand Lua, you may have come across a for loop in Lua, or say just outside of Lua, just in general programming. So a for loop will basically loop through kind of whatever you set it up to be. But loops are obviously quite an important part of it. So in this case, what we're going to see is we're going to loop through every result in our data.results array here. So at the moment we have these two. So what ends up happening actually is this code block here, from this div down to this div, where our three binds happen, is actually going to get repeated in the HTML for every entry in our results table. So if we had, say, 5 players playing, okay, we would dynamically see that this data.results gets 5 entries, one for each player, and therefore this div gets repeated 5 times. So instead of having it hard coded, because obviously we can't control, we don't necessarily know how many players are going to play at the time. So instead of having a sort of a div for each player possible, this is a really nice way of keeping it kind of dynamic and consistent in that, it just repeats this little block of code for us. So again, a really powerful way of making the UI quite dynamic. And it's just a really, really kind of slick way of building it. So what I'll do is I'm going to leave Sean with that one again while he's got that. And I'm going to add a script to this one. Okay, and we'll call this game results UI script. Okay, so again, what we can do is make sure we're on the client this time to make sure we can get a reference to the widget. So just to kind of extend the whole server client conversation a little bit further and hopefully not be too much more confusing, but we also have the concept of a local. So local is basically the local client that is this user or this player. So local only exists within those confines. So as before, when I said we were on the that screen UI, we had to use client in that case because there's no concept of a local player to that screen. Whereas when we use the user template, we do have a local player. A player controls this specific user. Okay, so we can, in this case, we can use our local in it. So here we can see that the API is telling us this is called to initialize a script on the client that controls this entity. It's just another way that you can kind of make sure that we're updating the correct client in this case. So just like before, let's do a self.widget, and again, self entity game results UI. Okay, but what we also want to do here is we don't want the results to always be visible, and we don't want them to be visible by default. So we can get our widget, and we can call a hide function on it. Okay, so widgets can be shown and shown and hidden using this function here. So we can either say show or we can say hide. Okay, so what this will do is when this script is initialized, so at the beginning of the game, when we kind of this user is created, it's going to get a reference to this user's results and it's going to hide them straight away. And then we can control when it gets displayed. So to do that, we can set up a update results function, and this can receive a table of the results from our game script. Now, just like before, we want to guard against actually calling this accidentally on the server and therefore the game breaking because it can't find the widget that we want. So if we can say, as before when we just said is client, if I say is local, okay, we see that this is a function that we can use. But notice now it doesn't have the global concept. That's because local only exists on a user entity. So we actually have to call it against the entity itself. So you'll see here the API is telling us that is local has to be called on an entity. So just like we've done plenty of times before, we can say self get entity to get this entity. And then we can check, okay, is this where we currently are? Is this on the local entity? If so, let's do our code. Otherwise, let's make sure we are. So again, just like before, we can say send to local. Okay, so this says, okay, let's send it to the local version of this entity. Update results and pass our results. Update that there. Okay, so again, recursively, what we're going to say is if we get to this point and we are on the server, then let's actually send it to the local version, which will then call this function again internally, sort of call it itself, but this time ensuring we are on our local client. So now we're in a position where we can update our widget. So let's say self.widget.js .data, and let's just double check our UI. So we've got that is called results equals our results. Okay, so that's gonna, whatever we provide this function, we're going to push that through. So let's assume what we've been passed is correct, and then finally, because we'd hidden it at the start, now let's make sure we show this UI. So we just got to want one more function in here, and this function is going to give us the power to hide this. So obviously there'll be a time in which we don't want the results to appear on screen anymore. So let's say hide results UI. Okay, let's just copy and paste this function to get that guard in place. Okay, and then what we want to do is just simply say hide. That will hide it. Cool. So I'm going to go to my game results UI. No, I'm not. I'm going to go to my game script. Okay, and let's have a quick look down here. So we should see we have a place where we output the results, and at the moment all of that's happening in the console. So what we want to do is we want to, instead of outputting that console, we want to set up a new table that we can package up in such a way that will fit with the UI, and then we can push that through to the function that we just wrote. So let's set up a new table here. We'll just call this UI data. Okay, and then for, so again, as I said before, our for loop in our UI is a similar method here. We're going to loop through all the player records. Okay, and we're going to set up a temp record. Okay, so temp record dot name equals, and I know that my player record stores the player, so I can say record dot player get username. Don't worry too much about all this I'm doing now. As I say, this is very specific to the game that I've written. The way you kind of handle this will entirely depend on how you've written your games. Okay, the time is the record dot game time. Don't know why any of those. Okay, and then our final thing is the difference. Okay, so our difference is equal to record dot, and that will be properties target time minus record dot game time. Okay, so that's going to set up those things we want to appear on the screen, and then finally we want to insert that into our new table. So UI data temp record. That's going to add this temporary record into our UI data, and then finally we want to update all of the users with this information. So to get to all of the users from here, we can use our get world for each user. Okay, so this is going to call a function on every user, and we can simply say user send to scripts update results UI and pass the UI data. Okay, so again, relatively small amount of code to get all this working. So update results UI, let's just check that matches what we've called our function. Just called it update results. So let's make sure that matches update results. Okay, so UI data will come into here, and that's going to get passed through an update there. So I think we're almost ready with all of that. Let's have a quick peek at what Sean's been doing. Nice.
How many players can we have, Max? We've got 6 little podiums here.
Yeah, I've set it to 6.
All right, I'm gonna make it look nice with 6 in.
Cool. Would you have you got a button in there, a HTML button?
Yes, to close it only.
To close it, yes. So
you probably don't want to keep looking at this forever. So.
No. So there's lots of different ways you can close UI, and again, it's entirely up to you. It depends on the implementation of your game. But what I'm going to do here is actually make it so you click a HTML button, and I'll show you how you can pass then an event back into Lua from HTML. That would be useful for things like inventory screens or a shop or anything like that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is with our UI is check this box here, which says requires cursor. Okay, so that will automatically mean that when this UI is shown, it's going to unlock the cursor and kind of freeze the player. It's going to stop the player from being able to run around, and it's going to give them a screen until they close it, or until something hides it. They will kind of have that cursor unlocked. Okay, so I'm going to tick that. And then if I'm just jump in here, we should see that Sean is busy giving us a prompt. Okay, so we've got this date HTML button here. Okay, close prompt. Cool. So have you got the function?
I gave you that. I just realised I deleted it in my haste.
You did. Okay. Back to you. Tell you what we'll do is, because it's not the quickest thing to regurgitate off the top of my head.
Here you go.
Okay, you got it there. Cool. So what we can do in our JavaScript at the bottom here is define a function. So this works slightly differently to a function in Lua. So you'll notice we have curly braces again, a bit more like a traditional scripting function. And this is because it's a JavaScript function at this point. So it is different to the way that Lua behaves. So again, curly braces, and each line is kind of terminated with the semicolon. So it's just little things to look out for. So what we're going to do here is we're going to give this function a name. So this will be on close button pressed. Okay. And then you see here, we've got this special line here called Crayta.call Lua. So this is how we can actually get Crayta, or get this function to call a function back in the Lua. As you might have guessed, what we're going to call is our hide results UI. So let's make sure we update that there. Okay, so we can see here that we've got our button being set up by Sean, and we have this on-click event. So on-click being when we click this button, what's going to happen. Okay, so we need to bind that to our JavaScript function here. So window.on close button pressed. And that's going to pass this string some data, and I'll use that just for demonstration purposes, but it's not something that we need to actually worry about in this case. Okay, last thing I'm going to add just here, just to show again, is a console.log. Okay, and we'll just say button pressed. Okay, so console.log will act in the same way that a printf or print statement would in the Lua side of things. This is just a nice way if you are struggling with logic in your code, or in your HTML widget. This is a nice way that you can kind of get some logic or some debugging information out to the console to try and work out what's going on. Okay, do you think that is ready, Sean? Oh, got close prompt.
Doing is we could do a cursor to begin with, and then you can show people how to do the press the button to close.
Yeah, I mean, I think that should all be set up now. When you click that button, it should close the UI and it should appear at the right times.
Yep, good.
Yeah, so if you're happy, I can give that a go.
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. Okay, so we still haven't got that intro. So if I press space, we should hopefully see everything we need. So that's our timer going. Okay, obviously I'm way too short, but just for... Okay, cool. So that's the next thing to fix.
Slightly large numbers.
So you'll notice at this point I can't move, and but I do have my cursor. So because I clicked that, we have that in place. But I can't. Yeah, I can't move. We're gonna need to format this slightly. So I need to close that quick before, because the next round's going to start. So clicking that button's hidden the UI.
You could be ultra competitive and want to get yourself to like a 0.1 million decimal place.
Yeah, you can get very, very specific. Okay, so now you'll notice that because we both took part of that time, both of us have appeared. I click to close that, and then I get control of my character back. Okay, last thing to check is in the console, you should see that I've got I don't know how clear it is on the stream, but I've got a couple of logs there that say client, and then it says display in square braces. So that display means it was from a JavaScript function, and it tells me that the button was pressed. Okay, so that's how you can log stuff out from the to the console from JavaScript. Okay, so let's just quickly fix that time issue. So again, let's just use that function we did before. So it'll be text.format time. Okay, and this will be we want seconds and milliseconds. Okay, and again, let's just format that to be seconds and milliseconds. Okay, so hopefully that should then come through as a much nicer number to look at that point. So what are we up to next? The help text. Okay, so we might have noticed this big neon voxel that's shining in this corner. So what we're going to do here is we're going to introduce a couple of widgets. One is going to be a world screen facing UI, which means it will track where the camera is or where the player is and make sure it's always visible. And the other one will be just a bit of help text to display and explain how the game is played. So if I start setting up the help text, Sean, do you want to set up a little world facing sign?
Just above it, yeah.
Yeah, just one above it on a locator or something that will... and I'll come in. Yeah, I'll come and look at what you've done in a moment.
So it's a good little voxel question mark.
Yeah, I was going to do one in UI, funny enough, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to stick to what I know, and I'm going to make something out of I'm going to make something out of voxels. Okay, cool. So I'm going to add this to my user again. So we want this UI to appear on the user screen. So we want it to be full screen UI. So let's go ahead and add a script folder to the user. So this will be the help text. Okay, and there is a package that works quite well with this, which will be worth having a look at as well. But just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to sort of recreate this one here. So again, we want to add a new UI widget. Okay, and we'll call this our help text UI. And then again, a script called help text UI script. Okay, and this is going to sort of touch upon similar things that we just covered, but again, just to kind of really reiterate the point. So let's make sure we get our local init set up in here. So this is going to make sure we're on the local client and not anybody else's. Okay, and let's say self.widget equals self get entity help text UI. And again, we want to make sure that's hidden by default, so we can use our hide function on that. And then actually, because our help text isn't going to change, but no, ignore me, getting ahead of myself. Right. Okay. So help text UI script, say update text. And that's going to receive a message again. So if self get entity is local, so again, we want to make sure we're on the local client. And to do that, we need to make sure we're checking that against the entity. If not, let's send to local client, update text, and pass the message. So now we can get our widget. And we haven't set that up yet, so let's go no further there. And then finally, we want a function which is going to hide this. So hide help text. Okay, so that's our hide function, and that we know we can just do a simple hide. Okay, so now let's work on getting this text updated. So if we go back to here, okay, so we've got this trigger box set up already, and if I look at this, we can see that we already have a function with this help text. Okay, and I can see that I've got my console log, which was currently printing out, but instead we want to make sure that we're doing it to single player. So whereas before with our results, we wanted to make sure everybody saw that, we used that get world for each user function, which would loop through and apply to every user. In this case, we only want the help text to appear to the user that's actually stood in the screen. So we can go quite easily. We've got our player. So when the on trigger enter, our player that entered the trigger is passed to it. Okay, get user. So I know that this player must have a user. Then to scripts. Okay, and this will be update help text. And what this needs is the message, which currently lives in the properties for this script. Okay, so this script has the help text, and we're going to pass that to this specific user. Let's just check that. It was update help text. Let's make sure that they match. Okay, and because I'm saying send to scripts, and I'm not specifically saying go to the local script, and on trigger enter is called on the server, this is going to also call this function on the server, which is why it's really helpful and important to have these little guards in place. So it will say that this is false and will kind of call it through this alternative way. This is something to bear in mind. So let's go back to our user. And how is Sean getting on?
It's all there and looking funky.
Cool. Could you jump into help text UI for me and just quickly throw together something that would just display some help text with another close button?
Is that on the user?
It's on the user, yes, help text, yeah. And I'll set up the JavaScript function. So again, on close help text. and we want to call the Lua function in here, which is hide help text. Okay, so on close help text needs to live on our button here, and we're not bothered about passing anything just there. We'll just call that close in there. I mean, I think Sean could probably do that a bit nicer in a moment. So again, we want to make sure that that close is a text field that comes through from here. In fact, I should probably just do that now, shouldn't I? That'd be lazy of me not to. So close prompt is close. Okay. So data bind value again, if we just put that in there. So data.close prompt for you there, Sean.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to put whatever's in here into that tag, and then this allows us to push that through from here. So if I go back and set up a property on here and call this close prompt type text, so just like we've done earlier on in this tutorial. So close prompt appears down at the bottom. So again, just by making sure that this is a text property, it allows us to use that on the client side to localize that in the local client's language. Okay, and one thing we do, because we know that's not going to change, that button is never going to update, we can actually define that straight away. So once we've got our widget here, we can say self.widget.js.data close prompt equals self.properties close prompt. Okay, so that's going to push that property text through to the UI as soon as the game loads. But as I say, because this isn't dynamic, because it's not something that's going to update over time, it's actually quite a nice way of just getting some things out of the way at the beginning done, and then we don't have to worry about them again. Okay, so last thing to do is just hook up to the message. So if I say self.widget again, .js.data, did we set that one up? Not help text. This is the help text. Okay, so whatever you type in here, it's worth noting, is just sort of for testing, but it's probably worth making sure that this isn't left as anything that could be, the actual text you want on screen, just to make sure that that it's updating as you'd expect. So if this was left, with actual help text in, if something was broken, it would still display this text, and it wouldn't necessarily know that it actually worked or hadn't worked until we see later down the line. So where that says how to play, I will set up a data bind value in there. Okay, and that's going to be our data.help text. And then we can get rid of that in there. So obviously, again, help text is going to get put in there. And that is coming through from our on-trigger enter being passed through a bit of a loop. But as I say, if you are struggling to follow along, I do appreciate this is a pretty technical subject. This will be an archive stream that we will be available to come back and review and sort of pause and slow down and rewind and follow it as you'd wish. It's one I'd kind of recommend doing and really trying to get your head around, because once you get to grips with how the UI works, it's a really cool way of making the games as unique as possible. And I think unique games, are really exciting to come across. So it's definitely something I'd recommend trying to put some time into if you can.
Andy also has, we also have a couple of tutorials on the tutorial developer website for UI specific. So if fast moving streams aren't your thing, then I guess there's a slow moving article.
Yes, yeah. I'll show that off again a little bit at the end. But yeah, so there's definitely some sort of text-based things that you could follow through to learn, as well as the sort of various websites and stuff that Sean mentioned earlier. Okay, so let's update our help text message here, and let's just check that all lines up. So help text and close prompt. Okay, cool. I think we're set up. So if you let me know when you're happy, Sean.
Let's have a look at what you've got so far. This is the help text.
This is the help text. Very good. Oh, actually, I should just have a quick look at your bit as well. Okay, so this is what Sean set up while we were starting off that. So it's just a simple world UI that we've got up here that says how to play. But if we now change this from world and actually select camera facing, okay, notice, it could just go a bit bigger. So let me just, I think, yeah, do you want to just have a quick look at that, Sean?
Yep.
I've set it to camera facing. I think it's just throwing the dimensions out a little bit. So
yes, it gets very excited when it's different dimensions. So.
It does. So would it put that back to medium? There we go. Cool. So you'll notice now as I move the camera around, I just hide all the UI, click away. So as I move the camera, it's actually facing me at all times. That's a really, really useful way of sort of what we'd say billboarding, to make sure that players can always see this regardless of where they're stood. One thing I should mention is world space UI. If a player stands behind that, they're not actually going to see what the UI says. So it's only, I guess I could show that here. So if I just slide this out of the way, if I can. Okay, if I stand behind this, you'll notice that those zeros have all disappeared. So one good way, especially with things like a help text or something you want players to notice, is to make sure that's screen facing so they can't really get behind it and they can't lose what it says. So let's just double check all of that logic quickly. So, okay, on trigger enter, we're going to push to a single user and say, update the help text with our help text property. Okay, so that's going to land in here. And that's going to push through the help text, ensuring that we're on the local server, so on the local client, after we've already got the reference to the widget. Okay, and then help text UI, which Sean has very nicely made pretty for us, is to set up that. We've got some bindings in there, and we've got our button, which we'll call our JavaScript function, which will then call back to hide help text here, and we'll close it. So it's a bit of a sort of, I say, like hopping around different functions, but as I say, once you've done it a few times and you start to get your head around how it all connects, it's quite a straightforward way. I'd say certainly because of the power of Crayta, it's certainly a lot more straightforward than it would be traditionally in game development. So are you happy and ready, Sean?
Yeah, I reckon so.
Cool. Let's hit play. Let's have a look at this help text.
I've got to play all around first, haven't we?
Oh, we have.
Oh, it's too late.
Okay, I'll stop that. It was far too soon, obviously, but okay.
28 seconds out.
How to play, so we can see that follows us, and if I stand in here, oh
no,
target time has elapsed. Okay, go back. It's giving me the thing. I just realized one thing I didn't do was to make it require the cursor was an important thing. So help text. I know what I did wrong. I know what I did wrong. I didn't get it to show. Okay, so obviously, as I say, we'd hidden it up here. So we need to make sure that we then actually get it to appear and actually show it. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I think we're doing incredibly well actually for a very complex UI stream on a Friday night compared to last week when we were struggling. Okay, so let's make sure that requires the cursor and give that another spin. Okay, I'm ready. Get ready. Oh, I could make a version of this which is like press the button as fast as you can. That might work.
Yeah.
That'd be quite cool. Okay, how to play. Okay, this is the title. Press the button when you think the target time has elapsed. Click the button to close. Oh, okay, it's certainly getting there.
Okay.
So on my list of stuff, I think we only had one more thing to do, and that's to get our intro widget in.
Oh wow, I should get on that.
Which you should, yeah, you should get on that because that's going to take you. Oh wait, no, you've already done it. Great. Cool. So what do we need to do for this? We should update this to have a text field on it somewhere.
Yes. Yep. Yes, because we're instead of the requires cursor, we're going to do the alternative with the input icon?
Yes, yeah. So you may have noticed in the console at the moment when we start, it says press A or space to jump, which is just a hard-coded string. But actually, what we want to do is actually parse a icon button. So I've seen a few people ask about how to do this. So it's really, really straightforward. Actually, it's quite a nice, powerful little way of doing it. So we'll make it so it says press space or A, depending on whether you're keyboard or controller. So it will change contextually. So to do that, let's jump into the widget. Sean, do you want to just maybe talk a little bit about how you've got that really cool image in there?
Yes. So we allow you to upload your own UI imagery via our developer website, which we'll link out to in a bit. Through that, you can, like, for example, for these, I made these in Figma, just external graphics editor, pretty quickly this morning, and upload them to the developer website. And then from that, you get a link to the image, which you can then, thankfully, now copy and paste into Crayta. And you can use that to have your own like HUD elements. So you can make icons for, say, like your health bars or a mini map, or in our case, like do your game logo. You can have it show when you first enter the game. You can do all sorts to make really cool looking custom UI when you get images involved.
Yeah, so it's again, it's one of those tricks that will really start to make the game look and feel quite unique, which I think is a really cool, powerful thing to do in Crayta. It's worth noting as well that once you've uploaded the UI, there is a small step where it will need to be approved, and that approval isn't automatic. It's pretty quick, so you're not going to be waiting weeks, or even days in some cases. You could be sort of minutes to hours. It's not going to take forever. But you won't be able to use it until it has been approved. So what we want to add here, Sean, if you could do the honors, would be a string, a sort of a div output for some text. And let me just grab one of these models because I want to throw this model back in here. Okay, and this is just going to say start game prompt. And this will be press jump dash icon in curly braces to start. Okay, so I don't know if that will actually render.
No, you need to pass it via the Lua.
I actually need to pass it in. Yeah, cool. Thought I would. Right, so do we have, so this is actually on the user, isn't it? So let's add a script here, which is our, in fact, no, we already have a script. Our user script. I'll just hijack this to show you that the logic's in place already. So when the player jumps, we're going to catch that and say if they're not ready yet, let's say that they're ready, and tell, like, sort of cast out an event, and that's how the game script will pick it up. So what we also want to do in here is get a reference to our widget. So just like we've done before, let's say local init. Okay, let's get a reference to it. So widget equal to self get entity games show intro. Is that what it's called? Game show intro?
Yep.
Yes, cool. Game show intro. And we want that to not be hidden by default because we're going to leave that. But actually what we do want here is a user script close intro. Okay, and just like we've done before, let's do a quick check. So if self get entity is local and all we need to do here is hide it. We don't need to do, unless you had anything fancy in mind with animation and stuff, Sean, or is it just a case of hiding the widget?
Nah, just hide it.
Just hiding it. Cool. Okay. So we close it from there. So what we can do is we can call here. So once we've already got our logic in place to detect the jump and say that we're ready, we can call our close intro. And again, even though we're on the server at this point, we're going to pass that through, and that's going to catch itself and say, right, let's make sure we're on the local client and hide the widget. So that should be everything we need. That says
We
press
just need
button.
to pass in the info.
We do need to pass in the info. Good job, you're here.
Where is in it? Here we are. This one.
Yeah, so if I'm going to set up a new prompt, which will be the close, let's say close button prompt of type text. So do you want to just throw that in there to update the front end?
Yep.
And I will update just here. So press jump icon to start. Okay, so what will happen is this jump icon will be picked up by Crayta, and it will work out if you're on keyboard, it will show you the current binding for the player's jump action. So obviously remember, each player can define their own key binding. So if they've selected to have the Q button to be jump, then it would show Q for them. For most players, the default would show space, or if you're on a controller, it would be the A button. So that's one way that you can guarantee that the players will see the specific and relevant key bindings for the action that you've chosen. So in this case, jump dash icon. Okay, that's Sean just going to finish that off for me. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that should work.
So should we see if that's given us what we want?
Ooh.
Ooh.
What's happened?
Index widget.
Oh.
Okay, let's go back. I've obviously messed. Doing well. Let's finish strong. What have we missed here?
I was unhappy. Did I spell? I didn't spell widget wrong.
Line 18.
It's this one. Is it game show?
Oh, I'm in a completely wrong script. That's a problem. User scripts.
What's it called?
Okay. Now I think it's because. So it's probably because the local client's not quite ready. So what we probably want to do here is maybe just schedule a quick wait. There's probably better things to do in this case, but
it's Friday.
It's Friday, so let's just chuck a wait in there. Okay, let's wait for a second, guarantee that. I think you can do things around, so is local ready? In fact, yeah, let's try and do this properly. So what we can do, schedule. Okay, so I can say while self get entity is local ready is false. So while it's not ready, okay, let's wait, and then eventually it should become ready, and it will fall out of that and actually give me what I want. Alternatively, it's me just misspelling something, so let's see how this looks. And another end. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to wait. That's not at all where I want that to be, is it?
As I say, that's good.
Cool. Okay, so it's going to wait until it's ready, and then after that, it's going to catch it. If that doesn't work, we'll go back to square one. Oh, it didn't work.
Local ready is not supported.
Okay, cool. That's me completely misusing that function. So ignore all of that. Right. Okay, we'll just go back to waiting for a second, and if that doesn't work, we'll have a quick look to see why. It could be that I've misspelt something along the way. So it's going to wait for a second before we actually try and access that. Line 22.
Do we need to get the reference? Do we just need to do that in there?
Yeah, let's do that.
Play it safe.
Let's play it safe. Whoa. Sorry, that's me ripping you up there, I think. Okay, let's do that. We still need that line that you had though.
That'll do.
Because we're going to use that later on.
Let me just give you that. Let me just give that schedule back in.
Oh, I was going to get rid of that.
Oh, all right then.
Yeah, let's be brave.
All right.
Oh no. Right. Index game show intros nil. Okay.
Is it meant to be local in it, or is it meant to be client in it?
I know it
Oh,
should
no,
be.
local.
It should be local.
There's local.
Right.
Yep.
Is this because it is called something different? It's game show. I put games show. I knew. I said it so many times. I've probably spelled something wrong.
I didn't even see that either.
There we go. Oh.
Okay. I do find HTML.
Yeah, cool. We were doing so well. We've gone so far without any problems. Okay, so the problem there was that we were pumping out literally what Crayta was regurgitating it into. So it's probably quite useful to see that actually. So as you saw, it actually pumped a load of HTML into the page. So what Sean will do here is he'll change that to a data bind HTML. Okay, so that tells the coherent game face binding to say, take this HTML and actually turn it into what it should represent. Don't just literally take what's in the variable and put it on the screen. So final. Okay, press spacebar to start. And if I just reach down here and grab my controller. Okay, so as soon as I move my controller, it picks up that I'm now on the controller and says press A to start instead. If I wiggle my mouse, we go back to spacebar. Oh, okay, phew. I thought we were going to have a disaster at the end, so. Real. Okay, so I can press space. See that Sean got in there before I did. Okay, pretty good. I can close that. So I think we've got a complete working game there, with some pretty nice UI and different things, different ways of creating UI, which is quite handy.
Yeah. Try to make the game a little bit faster. Yeah, that looks pretty good.
I think that works. Cool. So I think what we could do, let's go back. So if we just, as you say, yeah, if I just go to my game controller and I change it so target time is, you say 10 seconds and it hides after 5.
Yeah.
There's a pretty quick game.
It's going to make the intro look a little bit nicer.
Okay, so what I'll do in a moment is I'll publish this and get it into a place where people can come in and play it. So it's quite a nice way to end these streams. So if you are on Crayta, then get yourself ready for a link in the chat any moment. You happy to try that again?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
There we go. That aligns nicely. Cool. Sweet. So what I shall do is I'm going to publish this now. In fact, tell you what, we haven't got any music. I feel like a game show needs music.
Yeah, definitely need some music.
So some arcade music. I feel like this is good.
I'm excited to hear it.
Okay.
Nice.
Cool. Okay. That's all good.
I think that's good now.
Excellent. Right. So I'm going to publish this. And so, yeah, say if you are on Crayta, then do look out for the link. If you're not, now would be a great time to sign up. So if you head over to Stadia, google.stadia.com, or I can't remember which way around it is, stadia.google.com, and sign up for a pro subscription now. You'll be able to jump in and get Crayta and play this game with us, pretty quick. It'd be impressive to see if anyone can sign up before I can publish this. That'd be pretty cool. So let's publish this now, and we'll call this Push the Button. Okay. Description, a fun party game all about timing, made on stream. Not quite sure why I all caps that, but it's just that exciting, I think. And we'll pick a good name. And as always, as Sean mentioned, you can go to create.crayta.com and you can upload UI as well as cover images and other things like that. Let's go for this cool arcade. Right, it's a fast-paced
I would definitely say fast-paced.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's relaxing. I'm going to call it a sport. I'm going to be brave. It's a fast-paced sport. It's the latest sport.
Yeah, Sydney Olympics.
Yeah. I think that'll do. To be honest, it's a fast-paced sport. How about that? Continue. So I'm going to publish that. So if anyone is ready and waiting on the play page, that should appear any moment now. And what I will do is head to the play page, jump in and play push the button, and then I'll share a state share beta link, which should get people into the exact instance that I'm playing, provided it doesn't fill up too quick.
Did you set the max limit to 6?
Yes, yeah.
Good.
I believe
a bit later
so.
now, but...
Yes, yeah. There'll be a lot of people waiting if not. Okay, so assuming this has worked. Oh, that was the wrong thing. Okay, so there's a link, copy and pasted into my chat.
That 0.332. Oh, Laris and Iceland already in. Hey.
Hopefully mine should reset in a sec. Okay, oh, it's a full game.
Full already.
Okay, don't forget, target time is now 10 seconds. There's some very premature presses then. Must have been close. Oh, I was 0. Yeah, I was 0.2 off.
Oof.
Pretty close.
That was pretty good.
I think I win that one. Okay, we'll go for another round.
Oh.
Oh, it started a stealth round. Well, that was...
Oh no. We're not allowed to play.
Oh no, trucked out our own game. Hopefully it'll reset properly in a sec and bring us through. Oh, we can jump over. Yeah, press them all. Okay. Maybe some bugs to iron out, but how many players have we got? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there are 6 of us.
Oh no, Russ is not restarting.
Oh no, it's all gone wrong. Okay, well you get the idea. We had a fun one round. There's obviously some things to work out there.
We can update it.
But yes, yeah. So hopefully that's been a pretty useful stream. So thank you for helping me there, Sean. I'm gonna go and fix that before it gets lost too long. So okay, thank you for that, Sean. As we mentioned earlier, there are some pretty useful documentation and things that you can find. So if I just pull those up. It's going to be 1 second. So do you want to maybe just quickly talk us through a couple of these, Sean? So if I look at I'm on the frog one now. Want to just talk us quickly through what this is?
So as I said, GameFace uses Flexbox primarily for its CSS layouts, which is it's a bit difficult to wrap your head around. So someone made this really cool little frog-based game which teaches you how Flexbox works. So how to align items, how to position them on the screen, how to make grids and that sort of stuff. It's really useful for quickly learning the basics.
Cool. And then we had this one about selecting plates.
Oh yeah, CSS Dino is a good one. So selectors are how you specify which things you want to position and move. So that if you have a header on your screen or a box you want to move in a certain place, you have to tell CSS how to get it. And that CSS Dino will use fun little wiggly plates to show you how to specify certain elements to do stuff with.
Cool. Oh, I see. Yeah. So you can kind of access the different parts of the script, the HTML to start kind of styling and playing with and applying animations to and all that fun stuff. Cool. And then we also have our introduction to widgets and building a game UI tutorial, which is available on our companion site, developer.crayta.com. So you can search through here, and this is kind of all the text you should need explaining how the various things work. So things like the adding widgets, and then kind of a very basic HTML here, all sorts of different stuff. So yeah, there's quite a lot to go through here. So hopefully alongside this stream, you can read through this and start to digest that information at a slightly slower pace. And then the other thing was our coherent game face, or say we use coherent game face for a lot of those bindings. We only sort of scratch the surface of the power of using it. So there's quite a lot of things you can check through here. and quite a lot of rules about how kind of to use it in your game and kind of how it works. So this is another source. As I say, we'll get all these links into the description at some point soon. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sean. I'll leave you to go play some games. So thank you for helping me. I'll catch up with you later. Okay, so that's been a pretty intense, pretty quick sort of whistle-stop tour through how to create UI in Crayta. Hopefully that's not been too complex, and I'd sort of highly encourage people to go and jump in and start playing with those things, start learning how to sort of get these things together. If you haven't already, do make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube. We've got quite a lot of this sort of content already out there, and we've got a lot planned for the future. So do make sure you sort of subscribe and register for notifications to make sure you don't miss any of those streams. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram with Crayta Game. There's a great place to keep up with all of the latest news and those sorts of things. So things like our comic series, we've got a lot of imagery that goes through our Instagram, or just little bits of updates through Twitter. We're on Reddit, so you can find us at rCrayta. And also you can find us on Discord. So we're pretty active on Discord, and we've actually got a specific channel on Discord, which I'd highly recommend people who are struggling with UI to come and ask in. It's called UI Help. Sean spends a lot of his time in there, so he'll be kind of almost readily available to answer a lot of questions around creating UI in Crayta. So do make sure you head over to our Discord server to come and hang out with us devs and chat and hang out and share your hub time trial leader times. I think the last I saw before the stream, it's Matty Power is our current community champion with 33 something seconds. So it's pretty crazy. So if you have got a fast time, do make sure you head over to Discord and share it with us in Crayta General. We'd love to see that. And finally, we're coming up to the end of July, so obviously we're almost at the point where we're going to have our first round of prize fund winners announced and selected. So if you are working on a project and you'd really like to sort of get that out there, then do make sure you get it published and share it with us over on Discord, so we can come in and see it. But obviously we'll see it on the published page anyway. But yeah, it'd be great to come over there and share it to get some people in playing it. So the prize fund is it's certainly worth keeping an eye out on, and maybe if one of the mods has a link to the prize fund blog, just in case anyone has missed that exciting piece of information. So I think that's it. That's it from me. So I hope everyone has an amazing weekend, and I can't wait to see what sort of UI that you can all start creating now you've got all those tools at your disposal. So we'll see you next week.